Okay, we are live. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Set Up Your Virtual Classroom in Clever. My name is Rihanna Gutierrez, and I'm the Director of Digital Learning for our Technology Department. I'm also the person that many folks email asking questions about Clever, and I'm joined by my colleague, Brian. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Brian Vitorisi, BPS Tech Digital Learning Team. Thank you, Rihanna. Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, and so Brian is here today because we always have a very lively chat whenever we talk about Clever. So I ask that everyone please post their questions as we go along in the chat. And Brian is ready to answer them in real time. And I'll also try to answer them live as well by speaking to you if I catch it in the chat. So a couple of access notes. So this webinar is being live captioned by Otter AI. You might notice in the top left corner that there is a button that says that. If you click on that button and click copy streaming link or view live stream, you'll be able to watch the transcript. So this is really good for accessibility purposes. So if you missed something or you came later in the chat, please reference this as a way for you to get your answers as well. And Brian will post the link in the chat just in case anyone misses it. We have some housekeeping and norms that are pretty standard across all of our webinars. We ask that you please use your name in Zoom. You all are going to be muted by default because we have a really large group and we want to make sure people are able to focus on the content they came to learn today. Please know that equity of voice is important to us. Please use the chat box to ask questions. You can raise your hand if you have any. I'm going to try to find some designated time at the end to unmute some people to do that. You can also use reactions, like if you're following along, you can give me a thumbs up, you can give me a smiley face and the like. At the end of this session, we will be sharing the recording, the link again, as well as the exit ticket. If you've attended a previous session with us, this week or last week, or any session as part of the Returning Boston Strong series, it's the same exit ticket. You already have access to the link. Just find our session in there. All right, so now let's officially talk about Clever. I'm sure there's going to be lots and lots of questions, and I'm going to do my best to answer them. We're going to talk about how you and your students can access Clever, how you can set up your digital learning environment using teacher pages. We'll talk a little bit about what that access is going to look like. And also, we are going to explore some resources that you can use to help build your Clever knowledge and to support your students. So first things first, whether you are new to BPS or an existing BPS staff or teacher, Clever, also known as the Digital Backpack, it's the same link. It is a secure portal for all of our BPS approved digital apps and resources. We use this as a one-stop shop to support our students. And there are many reasons why this can be supportive. We'll be talking about what those are. It uses single sign-on. So if you don't have a BPS email today, you won't be able to access Clever. So it's super important that you make sure that when you log in, and I'll show you what this looks like, that you are using your Boston Public Schools email or that your students are using that email. You want to make sure that you, when you go into Clever, it has a really nice visual layout. So it's very organized. We're using icons to help guide people. It's arranged by category. We're always going to start with district resources and have things that are critical for staff and students, and then go by subject area. If you see it, then that means it's being shared with you. If you don't see it, that means you probably don't have access to it. And we can talk a little bit more about why that might be. And also, what another benefit of Clever is that it's really about, it really gives you access to certain apps that you would not otherwise have access to. So things like Sora by Overdrive, which is a library app where you can access the entire Boston Public Schools library catalog. You can get that through Sora, through Clever. And Zoom. We've been using Zoom to teach, and so we have controls enabled for you in the BPS Clever Zoom, so we suggest you use that as well. So these are some of the advantages of Clever that I think are the case. So, but I want to ask everybody else here to post in the chat, how might Clever support your students specifically? So tell me a little bit more about that. It can be one word, a couple words. How can Clever support you and your students this year? Like, why are you here? Why are you using Clever? You'll post that in the chat. We'll give you a couple minutes for that. One gateway to all. That's a great answer, Runa. Simplifies access. One place, organization, things for younger students that you can find and make sure you present. E-reading for an English class, absolutely. Better connections with students and collaborate with teachers, that's a nice answer. Combines everything students need to succeed. Allows teachers to see all the resources, analytics, helps with executive function. That's the first time I've heard someone post that in the chat, 100%. So all about like organizing, keeping them in place. All right, e-reading for students with visual impairments, absolutely. And student engagement, these are all awesome answers, so just keep those coming. All right, with that being said, let's talk a little bit about what we're gonna see in Clever. I'll just share one more thing, like Latoya talked about partners connecting, sharing with teachers and students and families. So that whole list of connections, super important. Thank you for that. All right, now, let's take a moment to go into Clever. Now I want to mention a couple of things. If you have a class schedule in Aspen, you will, when you log into Clever, be able to see your students and your classes. If you are a central office employee without a class, you will be able to access Clever as well. However, given that it's so late in the year and a lot of schools are still trying to adjust their schedules, you might not have your full access today. But please know that it's coming. If you don't have it today, you will have it tomorrow or by the end of this week. We're doing our best to keep up, but there are many moving parts to this. So I ask you, if you are not able to access Clever today, to just watch me and follow along so that you have a big picture understanding of how the tool works. And Brian is probably going to answer this question 500 times in the chat, so I'm going to tell you this right now up front. Again, if you are a teacher who's based at a school, like Brian used to be at the GRU, if Brian's principal at the GRU has the schedule all set at Aspen, Brian is going to see his students and apps and classes in Clever. If the principal did not do that, you will not have that access today, okay? All right, so with that being said, let's take a look. Brian posted a link in the chat, so I'm gonna pause the chat right now so that we can stay focused. So let's go to bostonpublicschools.org/backpack. All right. So when we go there to the link, make sure you click login with Google. And you notice I have a couple of accounts here, and one of them is my BPS email, so I want to select that one. And now I'm going to briefly stop my screen share so you don't see my password, just for safety reasons. So while I do that, please make sure you sign in too with your BPS email. All right, here we go. So I have a few different options here given my district level role. I can click to log in as a teacher, a staff, or a district admin. If you see the teacher option, that is the one you want to click. If you are a central office employee, once you get access to Clever, you would click login as staff, most likely. So right now, I'm going to select login as teacher. So I'm going to have Brian post this in the chat just in case anyone missed what I said. Again, I paused the chat briefly so that people are not getting overwhelmed with too much information. All right, now, I logged in as a teacher using my BPS email. And once I do that, I should see something that looks like this. Again, if you have a schedule in Aspen, you will see a visual that looks like this, with the 3 boxes, with the homeroom option, with the classes option across the top. Again, schedule in Aspen, you must have classes. If you are a school social worker or you're a related service provider, or a family liaison, you can have your principal or Aspen scheduling manager create a schedule for you in Aspen so that you can have Clever access to share apps that you want your students to see. So in other words, you may not be a person who has default classes in Aspen with your role, but that is something you can have created for you so that you can really leverage Clever in the way I'll be talking about it today. Because by default, you would just be seeing apps and you wouldn't be able to share anything with your students unless you have that schedule. All right. So I'm going to turn the chat back on just to make sure people are able to get any clarifying questions answered. So we're going to spend some time playing around with some of these tabs across the top. This is the teacher view. I'm going to go ahead and click the very first box, which says Ms. Gutierrez's art class. I have named this, I have customized this, and this is where all of us can go if we have access. If you don't, just follow along and watch what I'm doing. You'll have a copy of this recording afterwards. So with that being said, let's take a look at my my teacher page. So if you're unable to log in, again, make sure that you use your Boston Public Schools email. And if you don't have access, it's because your schedule is still being updated. All right, so I'm in here, and you notice I have things in there that say daily check-in, project work, music, newly added. These are categories that I have created myself. I'm going to show you how you can do that. So if we go to the lower right corner, again, this is underneath the teacher page if you have access. You're going to click on the button that says add. And now you can choose from category, PDF, link, or app. The category one is where you get headers like what you see here with my daily check-in. So that's where I'm going to create those headers, where I'm going to put my apps under for my students to see. And you can create as many of those as you want. But we were talking earlier about all the benefits of Clever. It's streamlined, one-stop shop. It's supposed to provide access for our students. So I urge you, when you use Clever and customize it, don't overwhelm your students with too much information. Give them the links they need right now and through the week. So category, I have only about 4 right now. If I want to create a new one, I'm just hit the category button and then just name it and say morning check-in. Now I have one already called daily check-in. So let's say I decided I wanted to rename it. What I can do is I can delete this category entirely, which will remove everything there, or I can do a drag and drop. So I'm going to drag and drop things that I have previously created, and I'll show you how to do that as well. So everything here, I'm just moving up, just to do a drag and drop. And then I'm going to delete my old category because I decided I want to call it morning check-in. Okay, now morning check-in, these are my 4 links. How did I add those? We're going back to the add button, and now I get this question asked of me a lot. So PDF is new. I wouldn't recommend using that because you can put PDFs in Google Classroom. You could put them in Google Drive. I don't think there's a need to upload a PDF to Clever, honestly. So rather, you be using link and app to add things underneath your category. So link is the one that I use the most often. So underneath add, if you choose link, that is where you can add all these icons that you see here. Every single one of these is a link. So let's click link. And then I'm going to play with these controls here. Let's say there are 4 things that I want to share under my morning check-in. And these are pretty common. I can share a video through YouTube. I can share my Google Classroom. I can share a form if I have a form sign in. I can also share my Zoom link. So if you are creating Zoom links, this is how you would do it. So when you create your Zoom link, you can post it here, and then you can create that visual for your students to check in every day with you. So I already have a sample one that I did here, but I'm going to do it again just so you can see that process. So you will need to pull the exact Zoom link. I'm just going to create a fake one right now just so you get an idea. So your Zoom link is probably going to look something like this. All right. So once I pull my link from the Zoom website, then I can copy and paste it here. I just typed it here just for expediting purposes, but you get a sense of what I mean. When you have your link, you post it there. You're going to give it a name. Now, I think it would be easier to just say the date and time. If you meet on a weekly basis or a daily basis, it doesn't hurt to just tell people this is when it is. So I'm going to put Zoom room 10 a.m. daily. And then I'm going to place it under a category, morning check-in. There's a couple of different icons I could choose from here. I actually don't think any of these icons are appropriate if you're going to use a Zoom link. You should use either the Zoom icon itself so students recognize that, or you can use a Bitmoji of yourself. I've heard a lot of early childhood educators say that they like using Bitmojis in place of the Zoom icon to invite people into their room. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm just going to find a Bitmoji of myself somewhere because I know I have some. I have quite a few. We're a Bitmoji crew over here. There we go. There's me. All righty. So the link is here, the title of my link, the category it falls under, and the icon. When I'm ready, I'm going to hit add. And there it is. I have a previous one that I put there, so I'm just going to go ahead and click the edit button and just delete it. All right, now I have this listed there, and I can just move things around and make it easy for my students. So if you're curious as to why I have these links here, it's my Zoom link, it's my Google Classroom link, it's my YouTube playlist where I post a daily video, and it's also my daily reading assignment. So these are the 4 things that I have determined as a teacher I want my students to look at on a daily basis. You can put links to websites here, Google Slides, Google Sheets, anything really. It's a link. If you are interested in using an app like Padlet, that's P-A-D-L-E-T, or if you want to use Nearpod or any app out there that's more of a website, this is how you would post it. You would post it as a link underneath one of your categories that you create. You can also create things that are very time specific. For example, there was a webinar I did some time ago where people were saying, well, I have a project I want my students to complete. I want to share things with my students that relate to video apps they can use or websites they can research. And I said, you can absolutely do that in the teacher page. So I have my 4 links here. And I called this category project work. So I put things in here that are mostly e-reading apps. So actually I should probably rename this, but you get a sense of things that can go up there for very specific times. These are sites I want you to check out, kids. Please make sure you bookmark these. A few of you were talking earlier about using e-reading apps. So I'm actually just going to rename this category and say digital books. And I'm going to move Khan Academy out of there because Khan Academy is not a digital book. So let's just bump that down. So in terms of digital books to add here, there's a couple of things you can do. Let's go back to the add button down here. You'll see there's an option for a link or an app. Now, the link is how I added Tumble Books. because Tumblr Books has a very unique link where you actually do have to pull what that is and post it here. However, Newsela and Sora were added as apps. And app is probably going to be pretty standard in terms of things like digital books. So let's go ahead and click on app right now. And you can type one, like let's say you're thinking about an app in particular, like, what's a good example of a reading app? Let's do Common Lit. Common Lit is a common one. So Common Lit is not appearing here as an option, so that means you can't add it directly as an app. Another one would be Sora. So if you see that as an option, then you could click on it and just add it right over. So Sora is one that's relatively easy to add. Now someone mentioned in the chat Epic. So let's do a search to see if Epic appears as an option. It does not. So if you don't see it appear as an option on here, there are two things you can do. The first one is you can reach out to me to ask if we have a subscription. I can tell you right now, we don't have a subscription for Epic at the district level. People have been added in mostly as a link. So the second thing you can do if you don't have a subscription like Sora is to add it as a link. So then you go back down where it says add, and then link, and then you just do the same process that I use for Zoom, where you post the link, the name, the category, and you drag it under. Somebody else also mentioned Hoopla. So we can do a search for Hoopla, but I think that's the same situation. Yeah, it is. So these are things to keep in mind as you do a search. You can also check underneath here where it says see 103 more resources. That number will vary. That's where you can find stuff. As far as Seesaw goes, you should be able to add it underneath this category as an app so the students can see it here. So to clarify, you would probably mostly be using the link to add things. But in the cases where an app is available, you would use the Add App button. Now, some of these apps might be classroom subscriptions or teacher subscriptions. So you will want to make sure that when you click on them, that you see what they are. All right. So as far as some apps go and what we have available, let's go back into the homeroom, which is the main page you see when you log in. This is where everybody sees, whether you have a class or not. So if you're curious, the ones that are across the top that say favorites are mostly things that you are hearting. So if I go down here to where it says staff links, this is actually where Clever begins for a lot of people, is when you see the header of staff links, parentheses district. So this is where it begins. And then as you scroll down, you'll notice there are various links for you to check out. I recommend hearting the ones you're going to access the most often. So then rather than scrolling all the way down, you basically bump them up to the top as a favorite. So for me, I go in Aspen quite a lot. I go into Teachpoint. Teachpoint is one of those things that you really want to make sure you use Clever for. Zoom, I want to heart that one as well. If it's filled in, that means I favorited it. Let's see what else we have here. Talking Points is going to be coming up soon, so you want to heart that as well to bring it to the top. And then as we scroll down, this is definitely an announcement. You've heard it here first. Underneath virtual learning sites, you will see Google Classroom and Seesaw. So when Seesaw is there, you can bump it up to the top as favorites. As we scroll further down, there's some apps you should check out underneath collaboration, creation, student voice, productivity, video. A lot of people ask me about my app recommendations, and Brian and I can tell you about some of our favorite apps, but our team, we are talking often about content neutral apps. So those are the ones we tend to recommend the most. because of their ability to cross multiple subjects and multiple grade levels. So as far as the apps go that we suggest as a team, you'll see them underneath those categories like collaboration, creation, student voice. Apps for whiteboarding, digital note-taking, stickies, polling, all of those can be found here. We've used these all extensively and recommend them for you to use as a staff member or something your students can use. As we scroll down, there's also a couple of video apps that are free that we recommend. If you hover over the question marks, they're super tiny, but if you hover over those, it'll tell you what the tool does. So Loom is a screencasting tool. There's no time limit on it. Definitely check that out if you plan on recording any video-based tutorials where you want people to see you and your screen. Screencastify is another option. However, it has a 5-minute recording limit. We are not paying for Screencastify as a district, so you would only be using the free version. All right. And then as we scroll down, we know we have some assessment tools that we're familiar with, like Illuminate. And then after assessment, everything is pretty much alphabetized by content area. So there's a ton of arts apps that you can use, digital literacy, ELA. So this is where you can find some of those digital books that you all were talking about. Not everything's on here. We will continue to add more. So keep an eye out for that. And we can keep scrolling down. Please know that if you are using specific curriculum like McGraw-Hill or FOSS or Savas, formerly Pearson, or Vista, those are all curriculum that will be shared with you based on your sections in Aspen. So if you are someone who has a class schedule in Aspen, let's say you teach Spanish, and you bought the Vista app, then you'll see the Vista app in your portal underneath world languages. I don't see it there because that's not true for me. If you are teaching with FOSS Science, you'll see the FOSS Science listed underneath the science category. But I don't have that, so that's why it's not there for me. And there's also another one, McGraw-Hill. McGraw-Hill will be on here. Again, if you are purchasing this as a school or as an individual, or you're doing it at the district level, you'll see it listed there. But if it's the case where we don't have it available at the district level, there's a couple of things you could do. You could reach out to me if it's not visible in there and say, oh, you know, do we have a district subscription for this? Are there any schools using this? And I'd be happy to make that connection for you if there is. Otherwise, you would just go back to your teacher page underneath the homeroom at the top where it is here, my art class, and that is where you would add your particular apps if we don't have them at the district level. So there's a question in the chat right now around creating your own classroom. So you can be added to an existing teacher's classroom where you can have access to the classes, or you can have your own class created for you. And this has to be done in Aspen. I'm just trying to make it as easy as possible. So that would be something you check in with your principal or Aspen scheduling manager about.
Ree, I'm sorry to interrupt. There was a question. I don't know if you have access to this. Is there a chance to see what Clever would look like as student view during this?
So that's a great question. I would actually have to log out to tap in to show you what that looks like. I can do that, but let me wrap up the part about the apps and then we can go into the student view. But that's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So as far as adding apps goes, I get a lot of questions from people about, what do you think about this app? What do you think about that app? And Brian and I cannot know about every app out there. We don't know about all the math apps in the world, you know, so we don't know about them for like specific grades. So it's really, really important that you reach out to your colleagues and check out some trusted resources. So I'll take you back to the slide deck very briefly. We have a website that we recommend on slide number 25 that is Common Sense Education. Common Sense gives you all the app ratings and reviews. I'm going to post that very quickly in the chat. I'm going to stop the chat so you can get it. Oh, I just sent it to one person, not everybody. Let me do that again. All right, so I paused the chat briefly so that everybody can see the link to Common Sense. Common Sense is a resource that should be in every teacher's backpack or toolkit, because this is where you can find different ratings and reviews for education technology apps, video games, music, movies, TV shows. It's also a resource where you can find things for just teaching students how to be safe online. And this is a great resource not only for teachers, but also for parents. So if we have parents in the room, you definitely want to make sure you check out Common Sense to support you with reviewing things for your own kids. All right, so let's say I want to look up first grade math. I can do a filter search right here so that people can tell us a little bit more about, okay, what is this app? Is it free? What grades is it for? What's the privacy rating on it? So we did a search last time. A teacher noticed that LearnZillion is one of the options on here. And she said, oh, I love LearnZillion. It's a great resource. So LearnZillion right now, as we see, is available for grades K to 8. It's free, and it has a privacy rating of 90%, which is pretty high. Now, in terms of why this matters, I can tell you straight up that these privacy ratings are really helpful, especially when it comes to free apps, because when you have free apps, not all free apps are truly free. What kind of information are they collecting about our students? Are they using targeted advertisements at kids? How are they storing our data? These are really important questions that you want to ask before you add any app to Clever or have all of your students log in. So using Common Sense as a resource to help you make these decisions is absolutely critical. As I scroll down on this page, it'll give me some anecdotes about how I could teach with it, what it is it good for learning? Should definitely take some time to review this. These are reviewed by experts who are teachers, parents, and professionals who know about these apps. Going down further, the privacy rating, you can see here that it passes at 90%. And you can see how safe it is, what rights you have to the data, advertisements, and tracking. So this is super, super critical as you look at any app, whether free or paid. Now, in terms of adding these apps, let's say I did a research on, Common Sense, and I'm like, ooh, I really like LearnZillion. I can go back into Clever, I can go back into my teacher page, and I can either add it as an app. That can be my first point of contact. Okay, can I add LearnZillion here? Okay, so we can do a search and see. Now it's not appearing here. So there's a couple things that you can do if it doesn't appear here, besides reaching out to me and adding it as a link. You can also look underneath where it says library. The library is another resource to find different recommended and reviewed apps in Clever. So let's take a look and do a search. So it looks to me like LearnZillion is actually not a Clever app, which means that I can't add it in here directly. So I would have to go back to my homeroom, to my teacher page and just add it as a link, because it seems like it's not integrated in Clever in a way that's quick and easy like some other apps might be. All right, now, with that being said, we have a couple more teacher tools in here that we should definitely check out to help us support our students. So let's say that I have my Zoom meeting. You know, we're in the room, we're learning together at 10 a.m. Okay. Now I want all my students to launch the Sora app. There's an easy way for me to do that to support students. So earlier, some of you were talking about supporting young learners or students in special education or students with visual impairments. So if you go into your teacher page where it says login tools, if you click that, you can launch an app for your students, or you can log out students, especially if they need that extra support. So go, it says launch an app, and then these are all my options there for apps that I can launch. And you see the little rocket guy, and that's the Sora one, so I can launch it for my kids. And now it says it successfully launched it for my students, so that will make it easy for them to open. You can also, again, log out students if you need to as well. And I cover how to do this as well in the slide deck. So if you missed it in doing this live demo for any reason, you'll be able to watch it later in the video or look at my slides. Another thing that you should definitely do, and Brian talked about this in a previous webinar, is around, well, maybe you have one teacher page, or maybe you have multiple teacher pages. Maybe I just create this one, but I want to share with very specific classes, especially if you're a specialist. Brian, you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so thank you. So I was a specialist technology teacher at the Greer Elementary School, and front-facing, I always had one page, so it was much easier for me with the kids. And as, of course, I'm talking, my dogs are running in the room again right now. I had one page for all the students, but then when I realized we went home and were learning online, it became more difficult and more challenging for me and the students to get on the right application. So what I ended up doing was creating a teacher page for each grade level with apps and links that were specific to what I wanted those students to work on. So I had I had a kindergarten page, I had a first grade page for both the first grade classes all the way up through fifth grade. And there were some duplicate applications between the two or the different grade levels, but it made it it was streamlined, I guess, in the sense that students didn't have to search through all the different applications and the categories, especially with the younger kids. It made it much easier on the students and the parents, as well as the questions that I was getting. So that would be my recommendation, is to have different teacher pages for the different grade levels that you do teach, especially with the remote learning. Sorry, my dogs are going crazy. I gotta mute myself.
All right. Thanks, Brian. That's a really important thing to know. So if you don't have access to your teacher pages now, this is definitely something you can do later. And we do provide links in the slide deck to show you how to create those teacher pages. So in terms of sharing with your students, right underneath that students tab on the left side, you want to hit edit student sharing. And this is where you would see all students, one or more classes, and you select what those classes are, or just you. So that would be really important as you push things there. Now let's go over the classes part really briefly so that we can then transition to what this means for the students and what they see. So everything I'm doing in here, the student will have access to. But it's really important that you check underneath to see if you have the classes tab. Now it says, oh, no classes found for me because I don't have a schedule in Aspen, so I don't have classes here. However, if you do see classes, you'll see little boxes that will have the names of your classes. And why is this important? It's important because, one, we're pushing out the apps to the kids, and two, if you are working with special ed students, English learners, young learners, those who need those extra supports, you can also have them use badges. So I'll show you what that looks like. So we have a badge here, which is basically a QR code. And this badge allows students to log in really easily. And with the classes tab, you're able to see what those are. So let's take a look at that. So if we want to get students onto Clever, we remember from earlier when we logged in, there's two ways. You can log in with Google or you can use the badge. But how we get the badge, that information is on slide number 29. And 30. So let's take a moment. I'm going to stop the chat. So slide number 29 and slide number 30 in my slide deck is how you would access badges. So you can print badges for an entire classroom of students. This is most standard for the younger grades, or you can download badges for single groups of students, so a single student. All right, so when you see those different boxes there underneath your classes tab, I don't have them because, as you know, I don't have a schedule in Aspen. You would see those boxes and then it would say launch an app, log class out. So if you click on that, you'll see that there are options to get those badges for the kids. And the badges are very unique. They're like passwords that students use. So if they lose this badge, you definitely want to generate a new one. And all of our information on how to do that is, again, on slides 29 and 30, if you're not sure. All right. Now, the final thing that you want to make sure you do to make sure you're providing access for your kids is you definitely want to make use of what are called messages and announcements. So messages allow you to send one-to-one messages to students, and announcements allow you to broadcast a message to the entire class of students. And you would access messages underneath the Messages tab in Clever. That's where you would push out things to a specific student. And you want to search the student in the class, so you can do that. And this would be within Clever. As far as the announcements go, that's underneath the Homeroom tab, where you go underneath My Class, and then you see here blasted across the top, it says, you know, new announcement, and that's where I would create a new one. And say the portal has, I cannot type today. Please. And then I can post that, and then that'll be blasted out to my students so they can know, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing when I'm in here. And messages and announcements are actually super critical for this communication, because you might find some students are not logging in, they might need some extra support. And so you can check as to what that means by going under analytics. Analytics, I think, have been misunderstood a little bit. And I'm turning the chat back on here. So analytics have been misunderstood because the communication had been last year, not from me, not from our team, that you had to go through Clever. Now, Clever doesn't track everything. Clever, for you as a teacher, all you'll be seeing in here is your student activity over the last 7 days. When did they come into Clever in the first place? And what apps did they click on in Clever? So you see a little bit more about what that looks like on slide number 34. So slide 34, and Brian will post that in the chat, is where you can see this is what your view looks like. And the reason why this is important is because if you want your kids to go into Seesaw, if you want your kids to click on that Zoom link, if they're not getting it, that might be because they're not able to access Clever and they need some extra support. So this is important for you to provide that just-in-time support for your kids. And now I'm going to wrap up by showing you what the student view looks like, because the student view does look a little different than the teacher view. So let's take a moment and log out. And I'm actually going to demo this with a badge because it'll be nice to see it in real time. So let's say I have a student who's going to log in using a badge. They're going to click this box that says Clever Badge Login. You want to make sure you allow your camera, and your student wants to do this as well. Okay, there we go. And then I just hold it up. Okay, now we have here favorite resources. So the students will see their favorite resources on the top. They have to heart it, remember, to get it to the top. If they don't see favorites, that means they don't have favorites. And then the very first thing they see are the teacher pages. So we have fourth grade readers, Rhino, so that's one page was created. There's Miss Castaneda's page. So they would see a whole bunch there depending on how many teacher pages are being shared with them. So if a student is in, 4 different classes, that means we're talking about possibly 4 teachers having teacher pages here for students to click. And I do want to say that it's a really, really nice touch to have your Bitmoji there if you're into that kind of thing. We do have a webinar that talks a bit more about how to create a Bitmoji. It's really easy to do, really fun. Brian can post a link to that in the chat as well. And it's also in my slide deck. So if you want it, you can have that visual here of you or of your students. Make it easy for them to notice because they're going to see a whole bunch of stuff there and you want to stand out. So do that. Alrighty, so we have the teacher pages the kids will see, and then as they scroll down, they'll see the various district apps. So these are apps that are shared in a fake school. So this is not how BPS's categories look, as you know. The first thing the students will probably see after teacher pages is actually a category called student links. So they'll see that. All right, and then they would go and they would click around. So it's up to you. As a teacher, if you're going to create things and put things in your page, you do want to make sure that you are giving them access to resources they would not otherwise have access to. So using this carefully is super important. All right, I'm going to stop the screen share and just take some questions for the next 5 minutes. And we'll do one more share of our slide deck as well as our exit ticket, because you will need to fill out the exit ticket to get credit for today. And the slide deck, if you missed it right now, we'll be sending you the slides and the recording this evening, as well as the link to the exit ticket. So again, if you missed anything, please don't email me afterwards because you are going to get an email from me by 7 p.m. today with everything. Okay, Winnie's giving me a thumbs up. Excellent, thanks. All right, so if you missed this, we'll send it to you. Otherwise, I'm going to take some questions for the next 5 minutes, and I'll just make sure I allow you guys to unmute yourself. If we can see a hand raised, and then we can go ahead and take a question.
It says the chat is disabled for me for some reason.
Oh, here we go. I just fixed it.
Thank you.
No problem. I know we had a lot of folks in the room. I was trying to keep an eye on the chat who were asking about the related services. So those were all, I think, answered by Brian. But it looks like Nadia has a question. Go ahead, Nadia. Make sure you unmute yourself. Okay. We can't hear you. That's so weird. Yeah, that's so weird. Do you want to post it in the chat? Okay, thank you. All right, do we have another question from anyone else?
Wade had his hand up for a moment.
Go ahead, Opal.
Hi, good morning. My question is pertaining to the information that's shared in the chat. Thank you so much for recording it, but I find that when I've listened to other or viewed other recordings, I can't access what the speaker is referring to. So how do we access some of the really cool tips that have been shared in chat when I go back to look again?
That's a great question. So I'll tell you what, I will share the link to the recording, the slides, the chat transcript, and the exit ticket. No problem.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, so I'm also one of those, thank you so much. You did a great job today. Very, very useful information. So I am one of the people who are a district-wide social worker, one of the itinerates that you're referring to. And I guess my name is Lisa Sadberry. I have 17 schools It may go up to 23. But I'm just wondering how, I mean, initially what I thought you said was to talk to the school's principal and they could add those students to their schedules to my list. But I'm wondering if there's a way for special education, because I provide counseling to all the students who have counseling in their IEPs. And so I'm just wondering, I was wondering how, if I could use this app to set up a virtual classroom to either do small groups or individual counseling. I'm just not sure if this would be an app that's appropriate for me. I know OT usually has like 2 or 3 schools. So that's like a different thing. But when you're talking between 17 and 26 schools, which we used to have 32. There are only 6 of us. So I'm wondering if OIT has thought about or can, and I've been on a lot of the Zoom meetings, but is it possible to use any of the apps that the district is offering to provide virtual counseling and have the confidentiality? And if,
Yeah, these are good questions. So first of all, we want to make sure you have access to Clever. So people who are not exactly assigned schedules or classes, who might be in a coaching, capacity, would be given access to like central office BPS, which is basically meaning that you can access all the apps that are in Clever. You just can't customize Clever for your kids. So that's the drawback of your role, is that you can access what's in there and support and coach people, but you can't exactly push out things. So I feel like on that level, you can do that. One of the things we have shared is that there might be a main school that an OT might use. It's so that main school can be the one that they use to push out things for their kids. But it sounds like there probably isn't a main school in your group. It's more like you just need Clever access to support your schools, but maybe there's other tools out there that are better for you to push out things.
And I'm wondering if you guys might have a training coming down the pipe about that. I know some of us have been inquiring about it when we first closed, and I don't know if you have thoughts about that.
No, I think those are great questions. Definitely send me a follow-up email and we can think about that, because as you know, COVID's changed a lot of things for a lot of people.
I know.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
Thank you. All right, I'm keeping an eye on the time. I noticed, so I want to make sure I get to Nadia's questions. So, all right, so Nadia, I mean, if you wanted to have someone create a schedule for you in Aspen, with your main school, then you can definitely then that would give you access to Clever for you to put those links in. But if you're in a situation like what Lisa mentioned, where it's really hard because you have too many schools, then it might be that you work with the classroom teachers to have those links placed specifically in their Clever portals. So I would say those would be like a couple of options. But if possible, it might also be like a one-on-one conversation. So definitely email me. We could talk a little bit more about that if you feel like you still need to work through the solutions. All right, so thank you all so much. I have a 10 o'clock webinar to head out to right now. But as you know, I will send you everything, including the chat. Thanks for that, Opal. All right, everyone, have a wonderful day, wonderful week. Bye for now. Thanks, Brian.